In today's show, we continue our player reviews with Justise Winslow, Keon Johnson, and Jabari Walker. We look back at what they did last season and look ahead to what's next. Which of these gentlemen are part of the plan for the Blazers moving forward? Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard, Trailblazers reporter Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Why don't you make it your first listen? Coming at you every single day, Monday through Friday, every single weekday, that is, Monday through Friday. So make it part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, we're continuing our player review series looking at a trio of gentlemen. Justise Winslow, Jabari Walker, Keon Johnson. We'll look back at their 2022-2023 seasons. We'll revisit our best and worst case scenarios from the preseason. And then after we look back, we will look ahead to what's next. Typically, we do these like one player an episode or two players an episode. We're going to condense them down to all three. So the look back, revisit best and worst, and then look ahead. We will do for each player in each segment. We'll start with Justise, then we'll do Keon, then we'll finish on Jabari Walker. It's going to be a whole bunch of fun. Let's get into it with Justise Winslow. Justise Winslow averaged 6.8 points, 5 boards, 3.4 assists, and a steal in 29 games, including 11 starts. He played 26.8 minutes, shot 40.9% from the floor, 31.1% from three, and 71.4% from the free throw line. All of that action, all 29 of those games came before the calendar flipped because his season ended the week of Christmas. Looking back and doing this, I did not remember that Justise Winslow had 12-9-9 against the Suns. That was that November 4th game in which Anthony Simons and Damian Lillard were both out and Jeremy Grant hit the game winner at the buzzer. They don't win that game without 12-9-9 from Justise. Totally forgot about it. What a game! What a game for Justise Winslow. But just 40 days after that game, well, a little more than that, more like 50. But some games after that, 6 weeks. December 21st, he sustains an ankle injury that looked really bad in OKC. At the time, like the way he was helped off the court didn't put weight on his ankle. Like at the moment he had the ankle injury, it was like, oh yeah, he's going to miss some time. Like that doesn't look good. But dudes twist their ankle in the league all the time. Like if you ever played pickup basketball, you probably twist your ankle. Maybe not as bad as Justise did, but it did not look good in the moment. And so you knew it'd be weeks. And then weeks turned to months. And then, a month turned into several months. And we didn't hear any update from the Blazers until the second week of March, in which they announced that they announced that Justise Winslow had undergone a bone marrow aspirate procedure. I don't know what that is, but the implication was a non-surgical procedure. When the press release came out, it was like the 17th of March, and they just said, March? Shout out to the Blazers, undefeated and being truly bizarre in the way they handle injury transparency. Keep up the good work, everybody. So, Aaron Fentress of the Oregonian later clarified that procedure happened on March 10th. You can just put it in the press release. Seems simple enough. Then I won't be a pedant about it. I might still be pedantic about other things, but I won't be pedantic about that specific thing. But after he had that procedure in March, he was, updates would come, no timeline. He'd be further updated when they were appropriate. On March 29th, the Blazers released a press release that morning, Justise Winslow had undergone ankle surgery and his season was done. From December 21st, did not play again, didn't hear from him until March. And then by the end of March, his season was done. Just 29 games, playing about 27 minutes a night. I think Justise Winslow was useful and unlocked a lot of what the Blazers wanted to do, despite him shooting terribly. The defense, the playmaking, the ability, the strength, so they could go small. It all worked like when he played, and it kind of, honestly, those skills, because those skill sets were so needed, the passing, the ability to like play big while being small, some versatility on defense, they really missed his skill sets. Those were things that they did not duplicate anywhere else on the roster. And so when he went down, things went south in a hurry. To be fair, they were already not heading in a great direction, but when Justise Winslow was gone, the season was going to follow shortly as just one that wasn't going to be particularly competitive. But before we talk about what's next for Justise Winslow as he enters the free agency this summer, let's revisit my predictions or my best and worst case scenarios for Justise that I laid out back in the preseason prior to training camp starting. This was back in September, and it was best case scenarios within reason, worst case scenarios without injury. Take it away, Michael from the past. What's the best case scenario for Justise Winslow? It's that he's the starting small forward by few weeks into the season and then holds on to it. At media day, Chauncey Billups mentioned that the starting small forward spot is up for grabs, with two names Nazir Little and Josh Hart, and then another name that probably none of us had assumed prior to that day, and that is Justise Winslow. And the best case scenario is that wasn't just smoke. It's that Justise Winslow's defensive versatility, his ball handling, his playmaking, his strength is a perfect complement to the starting lineup, and the Blazers need him to play, and so he gets in there, and he is a 20-some minute a night starter on a team that pushes towards the playoffs. The best case scenario is that the Justise Winslow, who showed up as a versatile little bit of point guard, little bit of center, 6'6" anomaly his second season in Miami, is back again, and that player who shot really well on corner threes, made things hell on offensive players, as a great backline help defender, and was a wonderful playmaker out of pick and rolls, shows up in Portland. And while he might not have the same usage rate as he did in year 2 in Miami, he's the same type of just absolute Swiss Army knife is the term that I'm looking for here, who can do a little bit of everything in a package that doesn't scream, I'm a point guard and I'm a center, but he does everything. What his position ends up being basketball player. He ends up starting at small forward, but he plays because he's so darn good, you have to get him on the court. The best case scenario for Justise Winslow is that he's not the eighth guy, the veteran that can help out this team with defensive versatility, but he is so much more than that. He's just too darn good to sit. What's the worst case scenario for Justise Winslow? Well, it's that while he has those skills, his lack of shooting and spacing on the wing makes him a difficult fit, so he can't possibly be a starter, and that he ends up being a low-minute back end of the rotation player, because on a team that's going to play a handful of other guys who can't shoot, not like a bunch, but Gary Payton's lack of shooting and Jusuf Nurkic's lack of shooting means that you're going to have more options where you need more floor spacers to complement guys that don't want to shoot. Well, the worst case scenario for Justise Winslow is that he doesn't graduate past eighth man. He's pretty much locked into that role, spoiler for the third segment, but the worst case scenario is that he doesn't tease up to maybe, he could start at small forward. Maybe he's an option ahead of Nazir Little. Maybe he's a better choice playing backup power forward. Maybe they can go super small because he's a center. The worst case scenario is that Justise Winslow is merely a low teens minute option, a guy who can play a little bit of both forward spots and offers a intriguing skill set, but not what the Blazers necessarily need. And that it means more minutes for Nas, more minutes for Josh Hart, more minutes for Jeremy Grant at center, because Justise Winslow, who was supposed to be the Swiss Army knife, is instead just a guy who can help, but not exactly the answer to all the problems. I don't think there's a worst case scenario where Justise Winslow is fully out of the rotation, just because you look at the Blazers roster and what they're going to be. But I think there's a worst case scenario when he has a real cap on his minutes because of how much he can provide. And it really, to me, sticks on the offensive end. Thank you, Michael from the past. I think Justise Winslow hit right in the middle, right? He obviously didn't hit his best case scenario because he was never the full strength starter. I think you could make the case that they should have given him that opportunity. Josh Hart's better than him, but the starting lineup isn't about better. It's about balance. And I think Winslow, you could make the case, would add balance to that lineup. But I will say, in the sort of defense of the Chauncey Billups decision making, Winslow and Nurk on the court at the same time kind of is dicey shooting wise, but at the end of the Josh Hart sort of experiments, he wasn't shooting at all, so the shooting wouldn't have mattered. I think really it was like you needed balance on that second unit and you need some more ball handling in second unit. It made sense, but I don't think you could say Justise hit his best case scenario because he was never the fully healthy, you're going to start because you make sense type of starter. He was useful. Like I said, he shot 40% from the floor. He shot 31% from three. it's not like he was lighting it up on offense. He was like Mario Hezonja, except the skill sets that and as I mentioned before, the skill sets he brings, they just didn't have. His strength and defensive versatility, particularly his ability to guard up against bigger players, and the playmaking, they really missed it. Things that the Blazers need, and I mentioned this in an episode earlier this week, my everydayers will know this, is like the skill sets they really desperately need are some better rebounding, better point of attack defending, and better playmaking. Justise Winslow, the platonic ideal of Justise Winslow, has all of those, like fully healthy and capable and like, 70 game contributor Justise Winslow is ideal for what this team needs. The problem is that Winslow just has not been available. His body has just not allowed him to be available. 3 of his first 4 seasons, he played more than 65 games. He has not approached that number. Even in the shortened years, the bubble year and the year that followed that, the condensed season, it's not he didn't play like, he was still very limited and missed a bunch of time in those seasons. And he missed time in this one. You cannot blame someone for getting hurt. Like that's not what I'm suggesting, but it's just like it is a reality of his situation is that availability has been an issue with him. So now he enters free agency, and my guess is that he doesn't come back. I wouldn't be shocked if he comes back on a minimum deal, but it's just like using a roster spot on a guy coming off a ankle surgery that was really bad to like maybe have it fill out. It's just it seems like an unlikely risk, particularly if the 2 guys we're going to talk about next, Keon Johnson and Jabari Walker, Keon on a guaranteed deal, Jabari on a non-guaranteed, but I'm certain he'll be back. It's like a spoiler for the 3rd segment, but it's like if they're taking up roster spots, it doesn't make sense to add another kind of like, not even development, but just another question mark to the back half of the roster. If you had any guarantees or any sense of Justice's health, like I said, his skill set is perfect for what they need. His body just hasn't allowed him to be that perfect player. All right, second segment, let's talk a little bit about Keon Johnson. The second-year player struggled a little bit, but is under contract for next season. Let's talk about what happened and what's next for Keon. But before we do that, I want to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. And if you're building a championship team like the Blazers hope to this summer, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With the eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage, look for the green check to know the part will fit, or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Motors Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right. We talked Justise Winslow. Let's shift gears and discuss Keon Johnson, the second-year player for the Blazers, who they acquired the previous year's deadline in a trade with the Los Angeles Clippers. His first full season in Portland, played 40 games and played 10.4 minutes a night. Did not start in any of his 40 appearances. Averaged 4.7 points, 1.1 rebounds, and 1.5 assists. Shot 37.6% from the floor, 34.6% from 3, 65.9% from the free throw line. He had 7 double-digit scoring games. 5 of those came in blowouts. He basically had 2 games where the Blazers were in competitive type of games, and he scored in double figures. He just didn't quite put it together in year 2. He was the buzz coming out of the pre-training camp world for the Blazers, as you're going to hear me talk about when Michael from the past visits us in a moment. He was the name. It's like, dude, this guy's really improved from year 1 where Keon looked kind of out of his depth, and decision-making was a big thing. It was like, this guy's getting it, putting it together. He's such a good athlete. He's checking the boxes. He could be a real contributor. And even at the time, it was like, well, it's going to be hard to figure out how he contributes because he doesn't have, it's just not a lot of spots for him in the guard rotation, even at the time, assuming that Gary Payton was going to play. But the buzz was that he was a riser coming into training camp and heading into the regular season. But then he just really struggled. He shot 41% on 2-pointers, including 23% on shots out on 2-pointers outside of 4 feet. The league average on 2s, and this includes bigs as well, is 55%, 54.8% on 2-pointers. Keon shot 41% on 2s and 23% on non-rim 2s outside of 4 feet. according to Clean the Glass. Just a combination of bad decision making, bad touch, and all those things. His shot under 40% from on 2-point range in his rookie season. Starting to become a 3-point shooter, right? Like his corner threes were a mess, but above the break threes, Keon shot well and above the break threes this season. It's just that sort of in between and decision making game, which is still an issue for him. But before we, Keon's young. He came into the league super raw as a 19-year-old. He's still young and kind of putting it all together. Year 2 is not the end for Keon, but year 3 is the year to get it done. So before we talk about the year to get it done and kind of prove it, let's revisit what we thought Keon might be with our best and worst case scenarios. Take it away, Michael, from the past. So what's the best case scenario for Keon Johnson? It's that he makes things tricky because he has to play. The best case scenario for Keon Johnson is that the Blazers' small ball plan gets even smaller, because if they look down the end of the bench, there is someone who absolutely has to be part of the plan, and it's Keon Johnson. The best case scenario is that the heaps of praise that Keon has received in training camp prior to training camp carry over into training camp. He has a wonderful week in Santa Barbara. He continues to dominate, or at least look darn good, too good to sit when we get to the preseason. And by the time the regular season comes around, Keon Johnson is part of the rotation because he has to be. The best case for scenario for Keon Johnson is that the young player that you're excited about come December 1st is not Shaedon Sharpe, but it's the guy who was drafted a year ahead of him, also as a teenager, also as a first-round pick, and it's Keon. The best case scenario is that the decision-making that sort of held Keon back at times, he's seen enough basketball and had enough reps at the NBA level that he tightens it up. It's the 2-point shooting that was holding him, he's really struggled with in his first year, is no longer an issue, and that the athleticism pops when you watch it, and that his budding playmaking skills take a step forward, and that his 3-point shooting skills, which is already trending towards league average, continue to take a step forward, and Keon Johnson is an above-average shooter, an above-average playmaker, and a super elite athlete. The best case scenario is you have to play Keon because he's too good to sit. The worst case scenario is that he watches. The worst case scenario is that he spends another year as in a developmental role on a team with guards ahead of him on the roster that I've already mentioned. The worst case scenario is that Keon Johnson can't crack the rotation. He can't jump ahead of the veterans that were signed or traded for last season in order to be part of a bolstered backcourt, a retooled roster. The worst case scenario is that there is a young guy who gets playing time on the roster. There is a 19-year-old who came into the league, but it's this year's 19-year-old. It's Shaedon Sharpe. When the Blazers are looking to find developmental minutes for a young guy who plays, it's Sharpe who gets the call and not Keon Johnson. The worst case scenario is that Keon Johnson's second year looks a lot like his first year, where he spends the majority of his time on a team with playoff aspirations not playing. Thank you, Michael, from the past. Pretty clear Keon, one of the players in this season reviews, that hit his worst case scenario. He spent the year watching. He didn't take the steps forward. He never earned regular rotation minutes. He's pretty much always outside of the rotation, never, other than some very early on in the year when the injuries kind of gave him an opportunity. He never got a real cameo. Even at the end of the year, it wasn't like they were like, hey, what about Keon when the things kind of shifted. Obviously, he had some health stuff in there as well. But I think Keon is one of those guys that would have benefited from the Blazers having a G League team in close proximity. Like next year when the Blazers do have a G League team, which is got to be clearly just for basketball reasons because they don't even have a name yet. But for the basketball reasons, it's having Keon be able to go play a bunch of G League games and then come to NBA practice as well to get both coaching and playing time, really valuable. That's what he needs. He's caught between the two timelines, right? He's caught between a team that was trying to be competitive pretty much all season long and he's a guy who needs developmental minutes. They couldn't really afford to give him developmental minutes. There were too many veterans who were going to play big minutes ahead of him. And then when you don't do that, developmental minutes means losing. I want to be clear. It typically means losing. So it's if you don't carve out those minutes to lose because you're trying to win, Keon doesn't get the minutes that he would need to flourish. He just got caught on a team in a weird spot, and a team without a G League team. So good, whoever the North Portland St. John's Blazers are named eventually, it's going to be valuable for folks like Keon. Keon's under contract. He's a rookie, so he's a rookie scale deal. So rookies get 2 guaranteed years, and then a team option for year 3, and then a team option for year 4 that you pick up heading into the season. So the Blazers will have an opportunity to pick up year 4, which would be the following season, right as training camp starts, basically. So I think for Keon, it's like he was an NBA player this year. He's point guard size, but he's not a point guard decision making wise. Like he's not that. He's like a 2, but he's not a good enough shooter to be like a spacing type 2. He's a slasher, ball in his hands, score only 2. But he's not a great slasher because he doesn't shoot well on non-paint 2s. Like he's just a dude. He's a really good athlete. Even among NBA players, he's a lead athlete. He's a competitive defender, although always not a smart one. And his decision making needs to his IQ, just general basketball IQ, just needs to take several leaps forward for him to be a high level contributor. I think the shooting started to give you like a squint and kind of see it with him. This is the year in year 3. He's only going to be 21, but year in year 3 to kind of prove whether you can stick in the league. It's tough. It's like probably unfair to come in the league as raw as he was at 19 and then play really limited minutes for the Clippers and Blazers in year 1, switch teams halfway through the season, play really limited minutes in year 2, and then head into year 3 when you, again, if you're on the roster, he could be a trade fill-in, but I don't think he has any like standalone trade value. But it's like, if he's on the roster, it's like, again, probably not playing, but also have to kind of prove whether you can do it, and you're going to do all that work behind the scenes. Huge year for Keon. I do not see a scenario in which he is part of the rotation for the Blazers unless they go super young and rebuild. And even then, I don't think Keon would be... I don't think like he would start or whatever. Like he'd be behind Ant and Anthony Simons and probably some young players they move in. He's a dude on the fringes of the NBA trying to stick. He has physical tools to be an NBA player. His skills need to catch up with his physical tools. And like the harsh reality of the NBA is like Keon might have 6 short months with very limited chances to prove it, which means when the opportunities do come for him next season, regardless of where he is, you better seize them because they will. It is not opportunity, not a lengthy visitor. Okay, to close the show, let's talk about Jabari Walker. But before we do that, I want to tell you that this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's easy to get caught up in what everyone else needs from you and never take a moment to think about what you need for yourself. But when we spend all of our time giving, it can leave us feeling stretched thin and burned out. And therapy can give you the tools to find more balance in your life so you can keep supporting others without leaving yourself behind. Look, therapy can be empowering because it can help you learn about who you are in our lives where we are constantly changing who we are. It can be a super helpful tool if you experience like a single acute traumatic event and you really need help working through it. But therapy can also just help you navigate your day-to-day life. Think about it like car maintenance. The way to help your car not break down is to make sure that you're getting it regularly scheduled checkups to keep it running smoothly. Therapy is just like that for your brain and for your body. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Find more balance with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Still a pass versus point guard. Still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked On Blazers. We're still running through our player previews. We've talked Justise Winslow. We talked Keon Johnson. Let's talk Jabari Walker. Walker played in 56 games. Played 11.1 minutes a night. Averaged 3.9 points, 2.3 boards. 41.9% from the floor, including 28.6% from the three-point line and 75.6% from the charity stripe. He didn't really play except for a brief stretch due to injuries and opportunity when he got a chance from December 26th to January 19th, and he played in 12 straight games. But at the front end and the back end of that was some garbage time minutes. So really he had a 7-game stretch over 11 or 12 days where he got an opportunity. And he was okay, but he wasn't good enough to stick. And then they had kind of had a numbers crunch, and Walker just doesn't have enough skills to be relied on as a full-time NBA player. He has one thing that he does very well. he rebounds at a high level. And when you watch him play, he has a real knack for rebounding, particularly on the offensive end, has a really good nose for going to get rebounds. But he doesn't have a bankable other NBA skill yet. He's not strong enough to really hang. He has just good hands and good instincts. You can get stronger. You can develop your skills. Having one bankable NBA skill is a huge step forward, but it's all about what's next for Jabari. 57th overall pick, taken in the second round. It's a 20-year-old coming in as a second round pick. He's not supposed to be a stud in year one. He's probably not even supposed to be like a rotation guy in year two. But Walker felt like he was a little ahead of schedule in summer league, and then he felt like he was a little behind schedule by early in the season. Then I was like, oh, maybe this guy can play. And then I think by the end of the year, it was clear like he still needs more time. In fact, during the tank era, the final 10 games of the Blazers season, he averaged 9.4 points and 3.9 boards, playing 22 minutes a night, but still 40% from the floor, 33% from three, 79% from the free throw line. He finished the year 16 of 56 from three. It's just the truth about someone Jabari's build in the league. If he can't shoot from the outside, he's going to have trouble sticking. He's not much of a ball handler. He's had not much of a passer. His way to score in this league is defend, rebound, and make 3-pointers. He can slash and score in kind of like cuts and garbage buckets. But if he's going to stick in the league, he's going to have to space and he's going to have to rebound. He showed he has the tools to be a very good rebounder. It's what's next for him that interests me. But before we talk about what's next, let's look back and visit Michael from the past. What we thought about Jabari way back in October of 2022. Take it away, Michael from the past. So what's the best case scenario for Jabari Walker? It's that he sneaks his way into the rotation a little bit later in the season because his size, his toughness, his IQ make him a useful option on a team with limited options at power forward. The best case scenario is that Jabari Walker, a guy who appears to be probably out of the rotation early because of his age, just 20 years old, his sort of the investment the Blazers have in him. He's a second round pick signed to a multi-year deal. He's 20 years old. Because of all of those factors, he seems like he's out of the rotation. But the best case scenario is when Jabari Walker gets a cameo, when he has to play because of injury or foul trouble or whatever it might be, is that he proves to be too good to go back to the bench. The best case scenario for Jabari Walker is that while he starts the season out of the rotation, he ends the season firmly in the rotation, not only to end this year, but going into next year as a second-year player with a firmly and confirmed position on the roster, firmly held and easily confirmed position on the roster and within the rotation. The best case scenario is that the little bit of passing ability, the little bit of ball handling ability in a 6'9" frame, the high-level rebounder that he was in college and showed again to be in summer league, both in the offensive and defensive glass, and that little bit of shooting touch, all of that package morphs him to someone who has to play on a team that just doesn't have many options to play his position. The best case scenario is that Jabari Walker is a backup power forward and not an end-of-the-rotation guy, but you say, who's their backup power forward? It's Jabari Walker, the rookie from Colorado. He's a second-round pick, and he can really hoop. Scenario for Jabari Walker is pretty similar, right? Also a spectator, someone who is outside of the rotation, watches games, plays at the end of blowouts, and is just largely not part of the rotation. But the worst-case scenario is it's not as harsh for a guy in year one in his position, like the same way it wasn't that harsh for Greg Brown to not really be a contributor until this sort of season change for the Blazers last year. Rookies, second-round picks are drafted to be projects. You draft guys to say, okay, year one, you're not going to be ready. Year two, you'll kind of show a little bit. And year three, you'll be ready to go. And then you'll be able to sign another contract. You'll have earned another contract by year three. The worst-case scenario is that he isn't quite ready for the speed of the game. And a guy who seems to do a lot of things pretty well doesn't do any of them well enough to be a consistent contributor. Thank you, Michael, from the past. I think Jabari hit his worst-case scenario, too. With young guys, the worst-case scenario is not that bad because it's like 20-year-old second-round pick. You're supposed to kind of take your lumps and watch. He watched. He had a brief opportunity to have a chance. Didn't really seize it. There's other guys ahead of him. And then I think also just like his skill set, he just wasn't quite there. The shooting was a problem. They just didn't guard him. Straight up didn't guard him when he played. And that became, when they were still trying to be competitive, a guy who someone who doesn't get respect on offense and who doesn't bring a lot else and is just like a solid rebounder is like maybe not going to be the choice. And I don't think it's a big deal that he wasn't the choice. it's what's next for him. He's got a partially guaranteed deal for next year. I believe it's $400,000 guaranteed. And so I believe unless he gets dealt in the offseason, and I don't think he would, because, I mean, he's like a draft pick that they picked out of the second round and then gave a multi-year deal to. Like they clearly valued him and want to be part of the plan. I assume he'll be back. I think it'd be a mistake to assume that he would be in the rotation early next season. But I think a reasonable goal for Jabari for next year would be to find a second skill that he can do in the NBA. He can rebound at the NBA level right now. If he has a second bankable skill, particularly on the offensive end, even if he's like a league average shooter or like slightly below, but he shot 29% from three. If he shoots something like 34 and some change % from three, which we're talking about like 6 makes throughout the season. Like it's not many at all. A handful more made shots, which is just like being a little bit scarier on offense while continuing to be, an energy guy and continue. He knows where to be on defense. He was not a very good defender as a rookie. No one is. There's a lot coming at you, but he has like a really good sense of how to play basketball and particularly a really good sense of how to rebound. I think he's part of the plan. I think a reasonable goal for him is by the end or middle of next season to be, like, okay, yeah, we need a backup power forward. He's the guy. Like, let's go. We can easily get some minutes from Jabari. He can play both forward spots. Like he can get in and rebound. Like at the end of the year, he's playing some like small ball 5 because the Blazers were so bizarre. And it's just like, yeah, this isn't going to maximize what he does. I will say this: you look at the advanced numbers; they do not suggest Jabari Walker is they suggest he's like straight up bad rebounder. Watch him play. If you watch the minutes, like he can. That's a real skill for him. The question is, what's the second real skill? It doesn't have to be shooting. Shooting is would be the most valuable thing for him to prove at. But if he becomes like a really solid cutter, and like on offense, even if you don't guard him, if he can cut into space and work in space and score off of just like teams are helping way off him, and he eats up that space and finds little gaps to be a problem. That can work, but he has to have a second bankable skill to be able to be a contributor. And if he's that, he could be a year 2 contributor. I would say in general, second round guys it's tough to stick in the league. He has the sort of size and general mold of a player that you could see sticking in the league, but it's going to be tough. I don't think it's a make or break year for him by any means. But you want to see some growth from him in year 2. I really like Jabari's game, but he has steps to make. He'll be 21 when the season starts, and trying to figure out where exactly he fits. And I think particularly his growth on the offensive end is going to be the biggest thing. Or honestly, if Jabari Walker just gets a lot stronger, which is hard to do when you're as young as he is, like you kind of just need time to catch up with you, the difference from 21 to 25 and just sort of like how your body fills out. That would be if he could just sort of accelerate the aging process a little bit, just because if he was a little bit stronger, he could really be a valuable forward, even with his limited offense. Just strength to guard, strength to rebound. He would be really valuable. That's another spot that I think he could take a step forward in. I'm intrigued by him. I think I really am. All right, close the show. I want to tease this. I am going to do a listener summit. We did them early in the season, then I kind of stopped doing them because we had a baby. It was hard to do a lot of sort of whatever multiple interviews for this show, quite frankly, that I produce 5 days a week. But I want to bring back the listener summit. So if you are a listener to this program who wants to be on the listener summit, email me, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. Send me a reasonable email with your pitch on why you want to be on the show. We're going to talk about off-season stuff. I will pick some from those. Be reasonable. Like, we're going to talk for 6 or 8 minutes on video. So send me a pitch, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. We're going to record that next week and it'll post sometime next week. A listener summit, off-season listener summit, second week of May. Email me, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com. Come back for Friday's show. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.